It's great to see you.
Oh, likewise. Thank you so much for joining me today for the podcast. I cannot tell you what an honor this is for me, because I had to tell you, Kristi, that when I did my functional medicine coaching academy course a few years ago, this was, I think, back in 2015, you were one of the first doctors who was basically teaching on that. And I remember actually crying when I heard you speak, because I'd never really heard a medical doctor, talk about the energy body. And suddenly there was this gorgeous woman talking my language, because I was coming to this as, I did EFT, I was a Reiki master, and I'd always been kind of, I had to kind of hide that side from any conversation with the doctor. And then suddenly there you were. So I want to thank you.
And we're having the same conversation.
Yes. Yeah. Oh. So, I never thought I would get the chance to interview you. I never thought I'd have a podcast, but here I am. And I want to thank you so much for all of the inspiration.
Oh, it's my honor to be here. I'm absolutely thrilled. I love the topic and I love what makes you excited, because it's what makes me excited too.
Oh, I love that. So firstly, just to introduce you to listeners. So you are actually a naturopathic functional medicine practitioner.
I'm a naturopathic physician here in the United States. That's a medical doctorate degree. You do 4 years of undergrad and 4 years of medical school, and you have to sit for your national boards to be certified in different states here in the United States. So I'm in Minnesota. Yeah. I'm in the northern part of the U.S. And so I graduated in 97. I got licensed that summer. So I have been in clinical practice for almost 25 years.
Whoa.
And I found functional medicine way back in 1999, and I took my very first IFM training course back in 2000. And I went through kind of the boot camp called Applying Functional Medicine in Clinical Practice. And so from 2000 till now, which is kind of amazing to think about, it's been over 20 years.
Yeah,
I've, had an opportunity to really grow up inside of medicine, and I get to really watch the whole functional medicine movement take shape and form. And I feel so privileged, the role I've gotten to play in getting the coaching organizations where they are.
Yeah. So for those listeners who are not familiar with the concept of functional medicine, because we're a little bit behind here in the UK, Kristi, there aren't so many functional medicine practitioners as there are in the States. So could you just kind of briefly explain to listeners what the functional medicine approach is and how it's different?
Well, and I just want you to know, you over there in the UK, you're actually way ahead of the rest of the world. So just so you know, I've been on all of the IFM training courses when we've launched the functional medicine programs into every country around the world. And the UK was actually one of the areas. We've been to London. When I say we, I mean the Institute for Functional Medicine has been back to the UK teaching and training functional medicine certification courses for now almost 9 years.
Yeah.
And so, it was amazing. The very first class we ever ran in the London area, I remember the room, we had about 100 people there. There was 3 physicians.
Yeah.
And the rest of the room were nutrition professionals and people who had wonderful degrees who did nutrition-based healthcare, right? And were involved in their coaching realm. But if I can flash kind of forward to just a couple of years ago, when we looked out at that size of that room, now we're looking at rooms similar to the US, where it's 200 to 300 people at a training. And we're starting to see 50 to 70% of those audiences there are now physicians in the UK, just like we're seeing here in the United States. Yeah. So I want you to know you're actually a lot farther ahead than some other places.
Oh, that's so encouraging to hear. It really, really is. And the pace of change has been so rapid, and it's really exciting to be part of that. So what is it that is drawing doctors to the functional medicine movement? What's special about it?
Well, I think to simplify it the most, functional medicine is science-based. It leverages personalized healthcare, personalized medicine. It sets aside the importance of changing and transforming your lifestyle in the ways that lifestyle healing and health can transform chronic disease. And instead of looking at just diseases, and instead of just tracking and following symptoms, functional medicine teaches healthcare providers to look at the clusters or the constellation of symptoms and to dig deeper underlying and figure out what are the causes of disease. What are the causes of those clinical conditions? So a huge piece of studying functional medicine is going back to your own physiology, the pathophysiology and the biochemistry. And when you're trained in functional medicine, you take core concepts in healthcare you're already familiar with, but you learn new ways to look for the causes from a physiologic perspective.
Yeah. So it's looking at the root cause. That's the big difference, isn't it? Rather
very much
than
so.
focusing on the symptoms. Yeah.
Truly. And there's another term called systems biology, or looking at the way systems work together in healthcare. And what is very interesting is when you look at the body, there are certain regions around the world that they have been doing brilliant systems medicine for thousands of years, right? Look at Chinese medicine, Ayurvedic medicine, right? When you look at these systems bases, they acknowledge the way various organs work together, almost like a symphony, right? So a classic example in functional medicine would be looking at the way in which your body processes and handles various different toxins or toxicants, right? From the environment or from inside of your body. So in traditional medicine, you might look to the liver, as really the origin or the source of issues that relate to maybe infection or hepatitis, or maybe toxic exposures that cause particular damaging effects. When we step back and we look at the role and the purpose that liver has, it's a critical orchestrator in allowing for the body to biotransform, package, eliminate, and get rid of a whole host of chemicals, hormones, right? Toxicants. And so when we look at the detox system through the functional medicine lens, we look at the liver playing an important role with the skin as it sweats, the lymphatics as it drains, the kidneys as it also excretes, right? And so we look to these various different important systems, right? The lungs and their capacity to exhale, right? And instead of just isolating and saying, yep, here is the liver, and this is what the liver does, we step back and say, these organs all work together in the detoxification system, right? And together as a whole, they're going to deal with the process of stress or toxicants or infection, right? Or a chemical burden, or detoxifying those pharmaceuticals that they're taking.
Yeah. And what I find fascinating is that latterly in your career, as well as your incredible kind of, your medical background, you've actually moved into the coaching sphere, haven't you? So
I love it.
So interesting because we've kind of ended up, I guess, in similar spaces, but I've come from such a different point. I mean, I used to run a PR agency, and you've been in medicine for decades. And it's, on paper, we were just like poles apart. What could we possibly have had in common?
Right.
And yet, I guess day to day, what we're doing is helping people to modify these all important, lifestyle factors that are going to get them back to health. So tell us a little bit about the importance of these daily lifestyle habits.
Absolutely. And, having been in medicine for so long and growing up in the functional medicine paradigm, it's so heavily science-based, but there's an extremely important part of functional medicine, which is about integrating in healthcare, both the science and then the art of doing good medicine, right? And bringing those pieces together. And, if I can just go back when I first joined IFM as faculty, now probably 13 years ago, what was fascinating is there was this large swell and this movement to bring the heart back into medicine, right? For practitioners to be seeing the patient, not the disorder in the ICD-10 code, right? For people to have a story for how they developed their cancer, or how they developed that tumor, or how they developed their metabolic syndrome, right? And what is so critical in functional medicine is the conversation and taking the time to learn the history and understand the lifestyle patterns that have gotten them up to this particular point, right? So the lifestyle is usually a major, and sometimes the major, and sometimes the only contributing factor behind chronic disease expression, right? And so the solution is found in modifying and improving, of course, the lifestyle factors.
Yeah, I love what you said about putting the heart back into medicine, because I guess it's really the opposite of the clinical field that many people associate with going to a very sterile office to be interrogated, maybe, or prescribed to and diagnosed. And you don't often associate the word heart
right
with medicine.
I love it. And it is true, right? It is really bringing the heart in medicine. Some of the most profound specialists, the MD lecture specialists on our stage, it's impressive because the people who are talking about the heart in medicine are the practitioners who've been at it the longest. And it's the practitioners who could retire if they wanted to, who won't leave medicine, right? Because of what it does to their soul, how it's inspiring, its purpose, its passion, right? And in functional medicine, you are helping people transform their lives, right? You're not just giving pills, you're not just cutting, you're not just going through a procedure or surgery. You are truly helping people transform their lives, right? And this is coming through such an incredibly important lens, right? You are helping people shift who they are. They're focused on purpose and passion. And honestly, when you start changing the way you eat, the way you move, and the way you think, oh my gosh, right? Everything starts to unravel, right? Because all the emotions are connected, childhood traumas are connected, associations are there. There's a lot of work and mindfulness that goes into transforming your lifestyle.
Yes, absolutely. And, that passion that you talked about there, I was just thinking of all the times that I've been at the IFM, which is the Institute of Functional Medicine for listeners, their annual conference in the States, and just sitting there in that room and seeing these doctors on the stage. And I would get goose pimples just listening to them because as you say, the soul that shone through, that these people just wanted to make the world a better place and help people to, as you say, transform their lives. And that goes, I think, way beyond the conventional definition of medicine as it is today.
Yeah. One of the leaders in the field is a cardiologist. Her name is Dr. Mimi Gorneri, and she's actually partially responsible for a huge piece of the 20-year movement of integrative medicine here in the U.S. She was one of the very first physicians. She's actually a cardiovascular surgeon. She was stenting patients, on a daily basis, and really in the trenches, helping people with severe acute coronary heart disease issues. And she was one of the first providers who participated in lifestyle trials and did some pretty important work 20, 30 years ago, looking at some of these transformative capabilities that diet and lifestyle can have. And she, as this prestigious, well-known cardiologist, started recognizing that her patients who took time to meditate and were more mindful, and who took time to do yoga and were integrating all these very powerful practices, right? That would integrate that mind, body, spirit connection. They were getting better results. And, it's exciting to see this type of a physician, right? Who has been at this for 40 years, right? Standing there lecturing to their peers saying, look, after all these years, we've kind of missed the point, right? It's connection, authenticity, vulnerability, trust, community, relationship. Right. And you just look at some of these statistics that show, when a partner loses a wife, for example, how long is it, that they're still alive? Or when somebody happens to have a heart attack, what are some of the statistics going on around those particular events? And often there can be heartbreak. There can be stress. There can be mental, emotional trauma that moved things into motion. So, I think we are in a very beautiful era in healthcare right now, where root cause medicine is starting to become more front and center. People want it. Physicians are seeking it. And we really, truly are seeing more of a movement to see deep healing happen and for people to really level up, kind of reach that next level of what their soul is here to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you say, it's about giving people the space to tell their story, because everybody has a story, don't they? It's never just they just kind of presented with this disease out of nowhere. There's always a story. And it's amazing, isn't it? Once you get people in a space where they feel safe and listened to, that the story just comes out by itself.
It is. It's so beautiful, right? And as a coach, and anyone who's trained in the functional medicine paradigm, that you're really going back and you're really looking at somebody's history, right? You want to know their timeline, right? You want to hear about their unique timeline and where they can go next, right? And so here we are today, right? Reflectively looking back in healthcare and saying, okay, for me, what were those 49 years like? At what point did symptoms begin and develop? And what triggered what patterns, right? And in that functional medicine model, we want to engage the patient to really take that time to reflectively go back and look at their own timeline. And for them to think about, how did I get here to this point? What pieces of me are worth keeping? Are there certain aspects that I've developed that really aren't of me and are not really my stuff? They're just belief systems, or they're kind of that extra baggage that we carry around. And then where do you want to go moving forward, right? Like, what is the trajectory to creating and cultivating the life that you desire? And that's the passion and excitement in functional medicine.
For sure. It really is. And so often people, I mean, we don't join the dots, do we? We might be knowing that we're experiencing migraines or IBS or whatever it is, labels that, but we never stop to think, when that started, what was going on for me? What was I doing? That was when I started that job, and we just don't often make the connection. Oh, right. I wonder if that stress of that job had anything to do with me getting sick.
Such an important association, right? And not everybody can connect those dots, right? They may not have that ability to look back and really see, yep, that makes perfect sense. That's how I arrived at this point in time, right? That's where those connections do tend to come from. That means, right? Because I think the story for coaches and physicians in functional medicine, it really leverages the tree of life concepts, right? And I think you've got to find ways that it's relatable to patients, that the clients that are coming in can really think about their own patterns and their own trends. And, we see the tree of life when we look back, it's represented in so many traditions, right?
Oh, again, yes. I'm Jewish. So there's a very strong tradition of the Eretz Chaim, but the tree of life is very rooted in the Bible.
Exactly, right? Absolutely. And so what's so beautiful about it is when we look at our functional medicine correlations, and each of us are our tree, right? We see the expression of our life, our health, our wellness, the way we connect with the outside world, all in those branches, right? In the health of our leaves, the fruits that we bear, how we bloom those flowers in the spring, right? The quality and integrity of how we express ourselves relates to the quality of our root structure, right? And the stability of the soil that we're planted in. Mm-hmm. Right. So what I love about coaching, why have I drifted from the functional medicine arena and just doing great naturopathic medicine towards the functional medicine coaching paradigm, is because it gives us the opportunity to move out of the branches and not just identify where we've got dysfunctional leaves or a dying limb, right? Instead of just dealing with the liver disorder or a mood disorder, right? Or dealing with the insomnia. Right? Whatever that medical problem is dangling out there in those leaves, right? Instead, we come down into the core of the trunk and we go down deep into those roots. And the roots are the lifestyle factors, right? And this is what we coach to, right? We coach to food and nutrition. We coach to healthy, healing relationships, right? To our ability to have resilience and manage stress well, to be able to move and to become more fit, right? To cultivate actual fitness and athleticism. And then the last in that line is looking at sleep and rest, right? Do we get nighttime sleep and daytime restoration through mindfulness, meditation, naps, and such, right? So do we regenerate, right? So when we look at those roots, they're so amazingly important to the quality of all of our healthcare. And honestly, sometimes it's some of the easiest things to do that are the hardest things to do. Right. They're not easy. It's not easy. And they sound really easy, but it's not easy to do it.
So true. It's so true because we're so entrenched in our habits, aren't we, Kristi? When we've gone to bed a certain way for many years or not rested because we were so busy running around doing our things to-do list, that it's actually really hard. It can be really hard for people to modify those factors. And I guess what you've come to realize is that it can't just be the doctor's job to tell the patient to go away and change all of that, because that's not really going to work necessarily.
Yes, I think we are also, I would say, coming heavily out of an era that probably originated in the 50s and 60s and 70s, where physicians really became the be all end all advice giver dictator, right? It was their call. This is what I see. I'm the expert. Don't question me. This is what you need to do. Fill the script, get the surgery, do this, right? And what we're finding is just because of technology and communication and science and education opportunities all over the world, that doesn't work anymore. People have questions. They have awesome questions. They want to know more about their own healthcare, right? They're not just willing to take a pill and walk away. They want to know more. And they often say, what can I do about this, right? Is there something that I can do? Well, here's where a lot of physicians have run into sort of this grid, right? This kind of gridlock where they technically know what's the problem. They technically know how to manage those symptoms, but they haven't been properly trained to dip deeper down into those roots to help people figure out, how do you change your lifestyle? How should you be eating differently? What's the right way of moving for your body, right? What is the issues of stress resilience for you individually? And quite frankly, physicians fall pretty short in discussing lifestyle factors with their patients, right? So often the nurses do a better job, right? Or the support staff or a coach that might be on the team. Certainly nutritionists do an excellent job here, but most physicians either kind of arrive at this epiphany moment and say, this isn't just quite working, right? I need to find a different way of advice giving, right? And so it changes everything when you start to recognize where the shortcomings of patient success is, right? The statistics with patient follow through, when you have somebody just prescribing and saying, here, go to the pharmacy and pick this up, I'll see you in 3 months. There's no education. There's no self-growth, right? There's no opportunity to reflect. How did my diabetes get here? What should I be having for breakfast? What time should I be going to sleep? Right? And people recognize this. They can see that their lifestyle is contributing to many of their chronic disease aspects, right? And they're asking the right questions. And when the physicians don't know the answers, right, the physicians either have to step up, lean forward, and gain more training, or they need to surround themselves with the right people on their team so that their team can manage the needs for helping somebody move forward in this modern era.
Yeah, yes, absolutely. Because, when you ask someone to change the way they eat, the way they sleep, the way they move, you're asking them to turn their life upside down, aren't they? If there's someone who's currently eating junk foods, going to bed after 4 hours of Netflix at 2:00 in the morning, where on earth they don't know where to start. It's like they're at the bottom of a mountain and you're asking them to just hike up to the top of the mountain. And I remember once chatting to a guy, Kristi, who was very into his fitness and his nutrition. He was, I think, a karate champion, very ripped, very fit, was at the gym every day. And when I told him what my job was, a health coach, he said, I don't understand. I honestly don't get it. Why would anyone ever need a health coach? He said, well, if someone's overweight, they could just go and Google how to eat properly, So what is the problem? Like, why would you need to give them health coaching? And if it were that simple, but for a start, if you were to Google how to eat healthily, you'd find 100 different ways, wouldn't you?
You wouldn't know how would you ever know which one to pick?
But then it's as you say, it's the how. How do I change my diet? How do I manage my stress? That's the hard bit.
It is. And it's where all the work is, right?
Yeah.
It's just that one piece of first getting the what should I do, right? And that usually for me as a practitioner is getting that patient maybe 25% of the way there, the how to do it, right? Like I got to tell them what to do and help them figure out what our next steps are going to be clinically and diagnostically. But how we're going to do it, that's all partnership, right? That's all me teaching them, my team engaging them. That's the health coach on the team and the nutrition team, getting them answers for those diet questions. And then honestly, for me personally, I rely on labs for a lot of that guidance. There's things I want to know about somebody's food plan. I want to know which foods provoke inflammation and allergenic reactions, right? So I look to doing food testing, and then we coach to those pieces. I look at doing stool testing, hormone testing, a whole host of important environmental toxicant screens. And I do a lot of genetic testing, right? And as those pieces come in, it takes the guesswork out. Now we do understand which part of your genetic expression has contributed to your dyslipidemia, your cholesterol problem, your hypertension, right? Your joint pain, your arthritis, right? Or even your obesity, right? Because when we're looking at obesity, 60% of weight is connected back to your genetics for body weight regulation, right? And so I get these genetic tests back on patients who who they exhaustingly work out. They work out in excessive amounts and they can't budge on the scale and they don't burn body fat, right? And it's because they're genetically predisposed to storing that type of body fat. And so I need the genetic insight to be able to know how to do nutrigenomic modifications to the diet. How do we customize the exercise program? I can't tell you how often people are over exercising or they're doing the wrong kind of exercise. And when we look at those genetics and we look at the diet plan, and then we coach them to make those changes, then life becomes transformative.
Yeah. Wow. It's so, so powerful. And when you compare that to people just flailing about in the dark, trying this diet, then that diet, getting so demoralized because the weight's not coming off and they still feel crappy. And it must be me, I'm just a failure.
Right. The self-deprecation, the self-sabotage, right? The self-pain, right? And what we need to really do is we need to get clarity about what are we capable of doing and how do we get there, right? And then we do have to deal with the emotional connections to some of these patterns, right? They are important. And we do have to acknowledge when there's trauma work and trauma healing to move forward, we've got to be brave enough to say, I'm not okay, or this piece isn't okay, or I'm not quite settled, in this area in my heart right now, right? Because we know those areas have a huge impact on chronic disease.
Yeah, for sure. And, everyone's coming with something, no one gets to kind of the age that we are without going through heavy stuff.
Right. Very much so. Everybody's got a story, right?
Yeah.
And in functional medicine, right, it's how did those tree rings grow, right? When we look at your tree rings in life, I have that conversation with patients all the time. So in my own practice, and like in every office that I have, every single desk and every room that I have, all over my space, I have all these tree slabs everywhere. And I'm constantly reminding my patients that every one of these lines in this tree is like a line in their life, right? And I want to know the story, like what happened here, when you lost your mom, or here's when you went through the divorce, right? Or here's when you finally graduated from med school and you're telling me how sick you got going to med school, right? Because I work with a lot of physicians, right? And it's like those tree rings, they're our timeline, right? That is modeling how did we get here at this point, and the story for how you got there is critically important to how we keep moving forward.
That's it. But yet I think most people are trained to think, well, I've got joint pain, I need a medication for my joint pain.
Give me the pill. Isn't there a supplement for that?
Yeah. And yet we spend so little time on that introspection of thinking, how was I impacted when I lost my mum, 5 years ago or whatever it was. Or when I moved to a different city and I didn't know anybody and
right.
Yeah.
And often, we find kind of at that core level, it's the relationships with people in your tribe or your inner circle that matter.
Yeah.
Right. And it also the relationship with yourself, right? Being able to take the time to connect with yourself and really making space to get to know yourself and work on self-care and really, truly find resolution and peace with self-love. And knowing the differentiations between being selfish and being self-aware and offering self-care. Because a lot of people get hung up in that space and they would much rather do things for other people, or they feel guilty, right, when they're working on their own healthcare or their own state of mind.
Yes. It's so key. I mean, we have that problem very much, us British women, not so great at looking after ourselves. I'm sure it's the same over in the States. And you had a bit of an epiphany, I guess, yourself, didn't you? Because you changed your life quite radically.
Yeah, I really did. I'd been, kind of you get in the routine, you get in the groove, love my work. I love my job. I'm traveling all over the world. I have 4 kids. My kids right now are ages 10 to 17. So I got a pretty good spread of them, in these middle years of growing up. And, I lost my brother to suicide. Just to kind of cut to the point, my brother committed suicide coming up on now 5 years ago. I was in 2016. Actually, now it's all coming up here on 6 years ago, it sounds like. And it was a shock, but not a shock. My brother had suffered severely from chronic Lyme disease, tick-borne disease, for most of his life. He was kind of this woodsy dweller. He loved being outdoors. He loved animals and trees and gardening, and geology was his thing. And so like everything in his world, was rocks and trees and plants. And he just loved studying in that realm. And, it was, and because of his love and his passion, he spent a lot of time in the woods. Right. And probably hundreds and hundreds of tick bites before he was ever 18 and 20 years old. Right. And so for him, his Lyme triggered a pretty severe systemic autoimmune reaction. And he struggled for years and years and years. He was one of my first ever genetic studies that I ran over 20 years ago when we started to have the opportunity to do some nutrigenomics and detox genomics. And so really digging into his process with him and really working hard. I mean, he had access to the best of diets. He had all of his supplements, there. He had access to all of those key components, right, in life that would have helped with the metabolic syndrome and the infectious disease piece. But the part that I could never reach and the part that his other healthcare providers could not support him on, he had a broken heart. He had this absolute hole in his heart. He had this sadness for lack of partnering. He deeply wanted to connect with somebody, and with his social anxiety disorder and dealing with his autoimmune cascades, he just really truly felt that as he was, that he wasn't lovable, and we got that in the last, few months of his life, really hearing what drove him to the end to leave was a broken heart. He literally died in the Lonely Heart Club. He committed suicide the night of Valentine's, and left a beautifully well-crafted, heartfelt note to my mom and our family, and really let us know he had a broken heart and he didn't want to go on one more year without a partner and somebody to share his life with. The pain was debilitating. He was very isolated socially. And, I literally do have to say, in that 124-hour window, right, that 124-hour window put things into such different perspective. He had every tool he needed in functional medicine. He had all the supplements. We knew all the genetics. We had the options for treating and managing a lot of the struggles that he was going through with his healthcare. But all of that didn't matter in the light of his heart was hurting and he needed partnership and companionship. And what he wanted more than anything was intimacy in his life. Right. And reached a point and he recognized, this isn't happening. And this is as far as I want to go in this journey. And with great kindness and self-awareness and very carefully planned, he exited and made things as gentle and loving as he possibly could for my parents and me. And I'd say that day changed everything, right? Everything in my life turned upside down. I say that is the first day I really shook my tree, which is the course I teach now called Shaking Your Tree. Right. And I shook everything loose and came to recognize I wasn't in a healthy relationship. I didn't like the fact that I wasn't getting to spend as much time with my children. I really went straight to my home and to my roots and to my soil. And I immediately started turning things over. I asked for a divorce within a couple months. I made some big career adjustments. I wanted to be the one dropping my kids off at school and feeding them supper every day. I didn't want to be running all over the world. I was spending, 25 to 30% of my life in another country, and that moment for me, literally that moment was my reset in the what mattered most, what matters most to me. And literally the very last words he ever said to me before he passed, the last sentence he said was, "Chris, how long do you think you can keep doing this?" And I knew what he meant. I knew exactly what he meant, right? Yeah. That penetrating, how long can you keep doing this, right? And, I was burying my extremely unhealthy marriage in a job and a career and a profession, being surrounded by hundreds of peers I love. It's like my days are fantastic. My patient days are awesome. I love teaching. And I was recognizing, when you don't have that home base where your heart feels safe and healthy, it affects everything, right? Yeah. And it was pretty profound how quickly things started to shift when I had the realization and I started to move things forward. But say my professional career took a huge change. And I really at that point realized where my shortcomings were. And that was, again, it's the heart in medicine. And am I really listening? And am I hearing people's needs? Am I trying to solve the right problems? Am I trying to solve the wrong problems? And maybe they're not my problems to solve. Ooh, and maybe I need to learn how to sit and hold space with my patients better and more effectively, right? And create a sacred circle for them to be in and really let them process and not have to be the fixer. And I think that was really the beginning of my plunging into wanting more skills and strategies that I could gather with the Coaching Alliance.
Right. My goodness, there is so much to unpack there, Kristi, with what you have just shared. But first, I want to say that my heart goes out to you and your family. I can't imagine what that must have been like for you and for your brother to feel like that, because as you say, you've done every test on him, but how do you test for a broken heart? There's no blood test for that, is there?
There's no blood test, and I was at the very bottom of his note, right? He said, nobody's going to really understand me, and sadly we immediately understood. Right? It made absolute perfect. I mean, we totally understood, but not to the degree, could not necessarily understand the degree to wanting to leave. And not keep seeking, right? But it's when you look at suicide, what is so shocking about suicide is it's a social isolation disorder, right? What we're finding is when people feel isolated and removed, we are seeing such an interesting acceleration of addiction, tendencies and trends where people are reaching for solutions that are not authentic. Right. We definitely see the whole addiction movement right now in healthcare and therapeutic interventions is around trying to move people out of feeling isolated and into feeling like they're a part of community, right? And here's where coaching steps in. Group coaching is fantastic, right? And a physician taking a coach approach in their mindset is going to be, again, kind of revolutionary sometimes at this point.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree with you more, Kristi. I know whenever I've done group coaching, I've just kind of sat back and marveled at the connection that appeared all by itself, really without me doing very much at all, just between these human beings, whether it was in a room or virtually on Zoom. And that this intangible energy, which just came out of nowhere and grew, was what was healing them. It wasn't even the information that I was sharing with them. It was something much bigger than that you couldn't see, you couldn't put your finger on it, but it was healing nonetheless.
Oh, it's so powerful. I remember at one point, Dr. David Jones, who is our previous president at the Institute for Functional Medicine, one of our co-founders with Dr. Jeffrey Bland.
Yeah.
I loved his strategy when we would do faculty retreats and we would work on creating new programs and new information. His style of leadership just resonated with my heart, soul so much. He would basically literally like lock us all in an amazing retreat space for a couple days. And he would say, we're going to work for group genius. And it always was. He's like, we're going to process and we're going to process and we're going to process. We're going to allow for group genius to kick in, because the synergy that happens when people are thinking and intending to focus on some of the same topics, it's so powerful. Like you just said, my patients share such incredibly insightful things. They inspire each other in a group. I think really it's beautiful to see what happens. It's definitely group genius.
I've never used that. I've never heard that term before, actually, but it is beautiful to watch. And it's the compassion, I think, that strangers show for one another, because very soon they're not strangers as soon as you put them together. And, once one starts to show that vulnerability and shares their story and their pain, and then it gives everyone else license to do the same. And then it's amazing. It's just incredible to watch what happens, that they change like before your very eyes, don't they?
Right. It's like a birthing, right? And they like shed layers, right? They just leave things behind. And that level of familiarity and connection with others and recognizing you're not alone. You're not the only one having those thoughts, and to be able to creatively allow for them to give each other inspiration for why changing their lifestyle worked so well. Just watching other people's successes is so incredibly inspirational.
It truly is. Yeah. And you talked earlier about the importance of meaning, having meaning in life to our health. Again, something that is very often overlooked. It's not something that people generally think about in connection with how healthy or not they feel. So can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, it's really your soil, right? If we go back to the tree of life analogy, that soil is made up of some really important elements that are nourishing, right? They're nourishing your sap, right? They're feeding those roots that's feeding into that core trunk of yours. So when we do look at our environment, we look at our community, we look at our people, these are other anchors that are critical in our soil. Yeah. But there's this big piece of our soil that's us being connected to source. Like whatever that means to each and every one of us, right? Each and every one of us have that sort of source point, right? And we can connect with it through visions and art and creativity, through religion, through language. There's a lot of unique ways we can find and connect with source and what source means to us, right? And a big piece of really living your passion and living to your potential is taking some of that time to really connect with, well, why am I here? And sort of that whole existential moment of saying, like, do I have purpose? And what do I want to have accomplished in the time I'm here? And so I tend to teach to and leverage a lot of the principles of the Japanese concept called Ikigai. Right. And Ikigai translates sort of in our American Western language. It sort of translates over to that which drives you out of bed in the morning, or even more simply, your reason for living. What makes you excited, right? What makes you excited? What sparks you? What makes you want to drive more and create and cultivate and puts you into flow, right? And puts you into that creative flow space. And so I would definitely say functional medicine was my Ikigai and has been for a couple of decades, at this point. I would say my current decade is really these next 7 years. I have carefully and with full heart and soul really kind of cast this new blend of our life and our professional world. So my husband owns an MMA gym. I madly fell in love with an individual who loves fitness and nutrition as much as I do. If I hadn't closed some of those doors and really followed that inner voice, I wouldn't have ended up where I feel at this point I definitely belong. Yeah. And so I met this amazing individual. He's a retired MMA professional Muay Thai kickboxer, owns this beautiful gym down here west side of the metro area in the Minneapolis region. And his passion was nutrigenomics. And we're on our very first date. And I asked him a question that I asked everybody on my first dates. And I said, if time and money was not an issue, what would you be doing different with your life right now? And he didn't even miss a beat. He just immediately said, oh, well, I would go get my PhD in nutrigenomics. And I looked at him and I what did you just say? What did you just say? And I hadn't met very many men in my dating realm in my 40s here who even knew what the word nutrigenomics meant, and it just opened up this amazing conversation that never stopped. And we were engaged 4 months later and married 4 months later. Wow. And now we own this integrative center where we've got a huge training gym. We have 5,000 square feet next door, big training facility. We now focus on families. We've got multi-generations that come in here and train and are involved in fitness together. So we built a brand new clinic for me here attached to the gym. And I have a brand new store for my nutraceutical line. And my focus is kids and healthy families. When I did a lot of this soul searching and I came up for air, coming out of the shaking my tree experience, what I realized is this window of time with my kids is so narrow and so small that the getting on the airplane to escape the emotional tension and trauma in my marriage and kind of running away to functional medicine and then coming back recharged and digging into my mom life, I didn't want to live a life I had to run away from anymore. Yeah. It's like, it was easy for me to fool myself because it was my Ikigai. I love medicine. I'm passionate about healthcare, but you know what? I love my kids more, and what was such an important flip for me, I would say is really this coming to recognize that I needed to build my working world and my professional world around my new updated mom goals. Wow. Right. And I want to work with healthy parents. I want to work with moms and dads who like to be active, who have healthy kids, who want to be healthier, right? Who want to do everything they can to reach their next level, potential. And so I'd say, kind of coming out of the crisis of losing my brother, our whole family model is transformed. I'm in a healthy marriage. My kids have a completely different home life experience than they had before. Everything is just settled in and feels right, and there's that sense of knowing when something doesn't feel right. And my patients sit across the desk from me and they tell me these things. I get sick when I go to work. My boss is a horrible person, right? Or I'm not in a healthy relationship, or my mom is a narcissist. And every time I go to her house, I just get sick and I need to figure out how to set boundaries, right? These conversations do happen in my office all the time. And we have to recognize how amazingly important they are. And I think your original question to me is really like this purpose, this passion, and helping people again reconnect to their Ikigai it's what fuels our soul, right? It's the whole excitement of being alive, right? And so I want to know if my patients know what that is, because that's a positive hook I can coach to. The more I know about their passion and their purpose and what really lights them up and makes them excited, those are going to be the things I want to leverage goals to and our trajectory to and where we're trying to get in this coaching relationship.
And don't you find though, Kristi, that until you actually kind of prod them to reflect on that, most people have never really thought of that. And I certainly hadn't, because when do you ever stop and think, oh, what's my purpose in life and what lights me up? And you just crack on with your shopping and with work and with running around to collect from school and,
get through the steps of the day, right? Go with the flow, right? Get through your checklist, right? It's like, get off the checklist and go live your life, right? Or make sure you use the checklist so you can get your stuff done and get on with your life, So, those tools are there for a reason, right? We've got to find the right balance point.
And it's so inspiring that you have done that, because as you, I think I heard you say elsewhere, you used to be married to medicine, didn't you? And now...
Well, yes, I definitely would say I was married, but I would say my heart, so I was deeply, passionately connected to medicine. Yeah. Right. And that was my relationship for many years. And now I want to be married to my husband and my life with my kids. And, there's plenty of time to keep doing what we do. I'm in the clinic 60 hours a week. It's not like I'm not in here, but now I'm in kickboxing class, and some days I'm in my yoga clothes and I'm on the mats with my patients. And, so I'm walking the talk and living it in a way that I never knew I could accomplish.
Wow. I think that's it. You're walking the talk, and it's reflected in the name of your new venture, which is, go on.
Yeah. So our big company is called Docere Vita. Yeah. And Docere Vita, docere is the Latin and Italian name for doctor, right? And docere, when you translate docere, it really means to educate and to teach and to inspire. Right. So I think in this whole era of my life, I am moving into what I have teasingly called myself the femme docere, where I'm learning how to use those feminine skill sets that were often squashed in medicine, right, that were downplayed. So for me, when I say I am becoming the femme docere, to me, that is me finding my heart in medicine, right? That is me saying there's this femininity, right, that goes along with that. Gosh, think about like the shaman woman of the tribe, right, who held space for their people, right? Like there's something so powerful in medicine about sort of knowing the role of bringing the softness, the spiritual source connection back into the tribe, right? And back to the community. And I think for all those years, for so long, I was trying to be the chief, because everybody I was teaching with, they were men, they were all over the age of 60, like it's the world of functional medicine. I was sort of half the age, of most of my teachers. Right. And it's like, I found it, I really leveraged what I needed to learn from them in the science and the biochemistry and the rigor. But what I really wanted to live my own life and my practice in a way that's really bringing forward the reality of what causes change.
Yeah.
Right? And how do people change and what matters?
Yeah. How inspiring that you have done it and that you've forged this life where you can step into your power unapologetically as a woman with your female energy. I love that. And I love the whole docere. It's a long time since I did Latin at school, but I think I pronounced it docere then. But going back to the original meaning of to teach. That's what a doctor should be, to teach.
What it is, right? And so the whole company is Docere Vita, right? And Vita, right, is vitality, right? It's your highest, most optimal, vital, well self. So Docere Vita is designed, it's programs, it's clinic, it's the gym space, it's our nutrient line. These are the things we have available to help you learn how to be your own best doctor, right? It's like we each all need to be our own best docere, right? Yeah. We need to learn, we need to be inspired, and then we need to go to guidance and work with those experts, our coaches, our providers, when we need help, right? But we should really be in the center of that hub of the wheel of our own healthcare and our own decision-making.
That really is flipping it all on its head. So that is an amazing concept. And I'd like to ask you where people can find out more about, because obviously people listen from all over the world and you're in Minnesota, but where can people kind of work with you remotely?
Yeah, probably the fastest way to find us and what's happening is to work with us on Facebook. It just tends to be one of the easiest places right now to find us and come play in some of our activites. Doser Vita is the supplement line, but my own business, my practice is Dr. Kristi Hughes, Doser Vita. Okay. So if you want to go find Dr. Kristi, you're going to see there's two different pages there. One is my clinical practice called Doser Vita. And so that's where I kind of talk about my hot topics and what gets exciting or articles in functional medicine. Then I also have my passion project, which is called Shaking Your Tree. So you would see Dr. Kristi Hughes shaking your tree. And that's kind of where I love to get into all these elements of passion and purpose and growth and development. So those are our two profile pages you can find us. But where we really get engaged and we have a lot of fun is in our Facebook group. And that's called the Doser Vita Forum. And we've got over 500 people on there. We've got ideas and tips. And so that tends to be one of the places I do a lot of communicating with people. People can reach out to me individually and I can connect them with our team. So we've got programs, we've got education resources, and I've got a mentorship if anybody's interested in participating.
Amazing. Kristi, I want to thank you so much. I know you're rushing off to see a patient, but thank you for your time, your energy, your incredible energy, which is so contagious. And it's been an honor to talk to you today. So thank you so much.
Oh, I appreciate being here. Thank you so much. And keep up all the amazing, great work.
Oh, thank you so much. Take care.
Okay, see you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.